The first thing I'd like to do is go over some of the basics as it relates to navigating in Excel. And in this document I have a list of many different basic skills that I'll go through one at a time. You'll know how to do many of these already, but I think it's good to review them anyway. So the first thing I'd like to do is demonstrate selecting a block of text. If you click somewhere within a spreadsheet, in this case I'm looking at a bunch of Amazon data, and I hit Control A, it highlights all of the data in this spreadsheet. If I go into another spreadsheet which has some holes in it, and again do Control A, I scroll down to the bottom, 29,000 rows and change, and then go out to the end, it also picks up everything. Alright, next item, to select an entire worksheet. Sometimes you want to copy and paste a whole bunch of data, and in this case, well, most likely if it's an unformatted document, if you hit Control A once you'll get the data, and then you hit Control A twice and it will select everything. In this case this spreadsheet has a little formatting in it, and so it only goes up a little bit. If I hit Control A a third time, it now has the entire document, and I can now copy and paste this material and put it in another spreadsheet. If I go over to this other document, which is much larger, and if I hit Control A once I get the table, Control A twice, and I get everything off into the limits of the spreadsheet from top to bottom and left to right. Number 3, expanding selections of data by entire rows or columns. Sometimes you'll want to select multiple rows or columns, and so if you click somewhere in the spreadsheet and you hold down the Shift button and then press down, down, you can select a bunch of things that way. Alternatively, if you hold down Shift and push to the right, you can select many things that way, and you can also go down. So granted, you can also do this with a mouse, but it's nice to know that you can work with data this way as well. Next item, selecting just the data in a column that has no missing values. Okay, assuming that there are no blanks in your data, in this case I have, let's see, over 1,300 rows here. If I hold down Control, Shift, and down, it highlights the entire column. This might be useful for copying and pasting something again into another worksheet. Alternatively, if I wanted an entire row, I could do Control, Shift, right, and that would pick up the entire row. Next item, jumping to the first empty cell in a column. And I'll combine that with the next one, number 7, jumping to the first empty cell in a row. In this particular set of data that contains pipeline data, if I click Control and push to the right, it jumps to the right before the first blank that it sees. And if I continue this process by holding down Control and pressing to the right, it kind of jumps back and forth between either it jumps over white spaces or it jumps over completed stuff. So you can find where the data becomes different this way. In this particular data set, I know that, let's see, there's a gap in time every once in a while. See that? So okay, so this is something that happens every once in a while, and let's just say I wanted to navigate through this differently than that. Instead of scrolling, I could just do Control down, and it would take me to the next break or the next blank. If I hit Control down again, it would go down and find the next blank that I'm looking for. Alright, next one. Number 8, jumping to the last row in a column of data that has no blanks. Somewhat similar to what we did when we selected an entire column by doing Control Shift down, we can just go Control down arrow and it will jump to the very last item. Similarly, if we start at the beginning of a row and want to jump to the last column, we can do Control and push to the right. Now I'd like to talk about item number 10, jumping to the last item in your worksheet. If you were somewhere near the beginning of your document and wanted to see where the end of it is, you could type Control End, and normally it will take you to the very last spot on your spreadsheet. This one has some formatting and typing that's happened in it already, so it got close but wasn't quite right. If I were to go over into this much bigger spreadsheet and type Control End, it correctly takes me to the rightmost column with the very last row. Now in order to get back home, I can actually press the keys Control Home, and that takes me to the first cell in the document. And with this, let's try the same approach, Control Home. And in this one, it actually took us to the very first cell in the entire document as opposed to the table. So depending on how much work you've done on the document, it might change a little bit how it behaves, but generally speaking, Control Home and Control End will go back and forth between the corners. Alright, lastly, I'd like to talk about returning from the blank regions of the spreadsheet back to the data. Sometimes when you work with spreadsheets, there can be a lot of columns. Sometimes there are hundreds of columns, and if you hit some strange sequence of keys and find yourself way out here in space, you can hit Control and then left arrow, and that'll get you back home, or at least to the last data that was there. And from down here, again, you can do Control Up, and it'll get you to the next available data that it finds. Because you can have over 1,000,000 rows in Excel and hundreds of columns, if you were, say for example, 1,000,000 rows past the bottom of where you wanted to be for some reason, you could very quickly get back to the data by doing a Control Up. And if you were down and off to the right of it, you could kind of do a combination of well, maybe in that case it'd be easier to just do Control Home and start over again. But anyway, Control Up and Control Left can get you back to your data. Now, in terms of how this type of content that was just shown to you could be used in an exam or an exam question, there's maybe two different ways that this could be approached. One would be a short answer, and another one would be multiple choice. So if the problem were to say, I have a large block of data in a worksheet that I want to highlight, what is the best way to do that without selecting the surrounding empty cells in the worksheet? One way to do that would just be to have you write that in by freehand, in which case you would say, I would click in the data and hit Control A, or you could also be given a list of multiple choice questions, and among those, one of those is the best. Although more than one of those works, one of those is a better answer.